And another appearance from Dixon. He's our new regular. Okay, so this week we're going to be talking, I guess, all things to do with influence, authority, and things of that nature. I know, Marge, you will probably go a little wide later on. Since Dixon's here, I don't want to have him sit around for 2 hours, so I might just get into some of that stuff. Dixon, it was SEMrush where you had that webinar or whatever it was?
Yeah, unfortunately, SEMrush didn't manage to get the recording right, so if people didn't watch it, then it kind of got lost. I've put up some slides. Yeah.
All right. Well, what was it on? At least we'll get the gist of it here.
So what we did was we took SEMrush data, and so we took random words, reasonably competitive keywords most of the time, so things like credit cards and stuff, and just grab the top 20 results and then smack them into Majestic data, Majestic's bulk backlink checker. And what we found was that I wouldn't say consistently, but with a large degree of correlation, we found that the results that were coming back in Google were all fitting genres, categories, topics. So the corollary, or the observation really, is that as a keyword gets more developed, as people know what a keyword is about, or as Google knows what a keyword is about, instead of trying to return results from the whole universe, it will try and return results from sites that are already about that topic. And so an example, so a good way of describing it is if you go into a library and you're trying to find the weight of the moon, the mass of the moon, then if you start at book number 1 and start going through to try and find the mass of the moon, it's going to take you forever.
If you go to the astronomy section, it's a good place.
Exactly. You go to the astronomy section, or the physics section, or the natural science section. You're going to find it a lot quicker. And I think that there's quite a bit of research out there that suggests that this is a good strategy for a search engine to use, because it very quickly, well, firstly, it makes things faster if they can categorize websites, but also it makes less opportunity for spam, because if you create a site that's all about pawns, pills, and casinos, then it's unlikely to rank for the mass of the moon, because that's not related to those categories. And certainly we didn't show proof that that's what's happening, but I do think that there's strong evidence, and there's also some quite good research papers out there about search as a whole, not necessarily Google search, being much better if you categorize books, categorize pages before you start retrieving information about them. That was it.
When you were looking at that stuff, did you see any correlation between where you said Google had kind of learned what the keyword, what that query space was about?
Yeah,
that narrower slice of sites. So you might get one site with 3 or 4 spread out across the top 20, say.
Yeah, I mean, that starts getting a little weaker. My demonstration gets a little weaker unless I choose keywords that we all understand. So a really good one that you can put in is, and it's actually a story that probably most of us remember from the time. If you put in Katrina before Hurricane Katrina, then it all came back with stuff about Katrina in the waves, or Katrina the name, and then of course Google started learning, because the topic of the word changed its meaning, and these days if you put Katrina into Google, you're just going to get weather sites and history about and stuff about how Katrina the hurricane happened. So Google has of course learned from that perspective, and I think that. I think that it would, because it would learn, because the nature of users and the nature of content that starts filtering to the top will help to categorize. I think what's an interesting question is, how does Google categorize websites? And I don't know the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure it's different to the way the Majestic does. But I do think they categorize websites into topics. I do think they do.
I argue that since 2003, when they did the Florida update, they introduce some topic sensitivity at that point, and it's just being, that little gear is being turned down more and more as the search engine ages. So they're using it more and more over links, in my opinion.
Yeah, they may be. I don't know whether it's been there for a long, long time, but we've never really paid attention to it. It may well have been there for a long time, but because no one else has categorized the web. That's the basic thing. So you haven't got any independent or non-independent view of what all these websites are about, or web pages are about. So
yeah, you know, you could look at zillions of patents if it's categorizing you know, websites or people or users or whatever. You know, Google's for a long time, you know, had an interest in that, so I don't think it's much of a stretch to say some shape, way, or form that's obvious. It will be going on with them. So.
No, I agree. I don't think it is a stretch. And also, of course, Matt Cutts, before he took a good holiday, did talk about topical PageRank in one of his you know, lessons to the community. And I think that was about a year ago now that he said that, maybe about 10 months. And he didn't say, he said at the time that the engineers were working on some really exciting stuff. But that's as much as he alluded to, really. But it excited me at the time because we were, you know, working on this topical stuff.
Well, you know, even if you look at like personalization patents and things like that, same idea. You know what I mean? What kind of things are people searching the most? What are people that they're connected to from whatever social sites or Gmail or wherever? You know, what do they have in common, et cetera, et cetera? You know what I mean? So if they're categorizing users and user interests on that level, it stands to reason that websites to a degree and pages themselves are going to be categorized as well.
And we see categorization in semantic words, so we know that happens. You know, so we know that Google has associated one word with another word, and that's pretty clear. So that in itself is putting things into topics, into buckets of some description.
As an anecdotal addition to that, we're starting to see in more niches what some people might classify as brand search taking over, when it's really more of a very heavily weighted topic site, or, you know, a site in that industry or that niche, getting more relevance and ranking for terms that really don't exist on those pages directly, where things like customs replace with personalization. Technically, they're similar words, but in that particular niche, they actually do mean something different. So it's actually making that part of search worse, because people are looking for something that's just personalized. Personalized just means you have your initials scratched on it.
Sure, I think in some ways it does get it wrong, because if you put in the word majestic, I mean, it can mean so many things. You know, it could be, you know, a big sunrise. It could be a footwear shop. It could be a wine store. You know, so it's hard for Google to categorize such a generic word. But as the search phrase gets more specific, then it becomes much easier to put it in a bucket.
That's also where the click stuff comes through. The click analysis, I think that has a lot to do with the categorization and figuring out who's the big kid on the block. In my opinion, since so many people search for majestic.
And Terry, I bet you, I think going hand in hand with what you're about to say too, would be reformatting of queries. Meaning, you know, somebody types in a query, then they click, come back, bounce back to the SERP, and then they reformat with a couple more words that they can associate those, just like you would with the click data.
Because majestic SEO is almost at the top of the page already when you put majestic in, right?
It is in some parts of the world and not in others. Whereas what's interesting is that before we changed, we were on the first page in the top 5 for the phrase SEO. We're never going to do that because we got it. We lost it out, the domain and the brand and everything. But you're right. You know, of course, I'm fighting over that keyword. It helps that we got a trademark, I think, on the keyword. I think that, you know, it helps that we got the .com, but it doesn't help that Majestic Wine is such a big brand. But, you know, I love a challenge. You know.
Oh, Majestic is the wine in the UK?
Oh, it's a massive company in the UK. Thousands of employees, for sure, yeah. And Majestic Athletic, I think, is a fairly big sneaker footwear store in the US, I believe, as well. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
So
I
there's
never.
and of
We
course,
used to have a stereo store called Majestic Sound here in Canada. Big
yeah, I mean,
Canadian cross.
it's a generic keyword. And if you just put in the word generic, I mean, every other theatre in the world is called Majestic Theatre or Majestic Hotel. So we've got a long challenge ahead of us. But what it does tell me is that, you know, as I build a brand around the phrase majestic, my challenge is, you know, to widen my audience so that more people hear of Majestic and associate it with us as opposed to the wine company. I think that's a big challenge because I'm in a niche industry. But hey, I'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, to a degree, I'm sure someone's searching for wine or someone's searching for link data. You know what I mean? They're going to associate that brand with a name. It's not like you got two people with similar names in the same niche. So, you know, I don't.
No, true, but what it. But,
how many messages do you get on your site going, you know, where's the Merlot?
Yeah, but to Terry's point, though, Terry's point is that you know, the click-through rate plays a big part in making that decision. So right now in the UK, I can tell you that for every person that would click on Majestic, if Majestic was number 2 in the list, compared to the number of people that would click on Majestic Wine, if Majestic Wine was number 2 in the list, Majestic Wine would win every time. So Google will, over time, say in the UK, Majestic Wine is the right answer, the best answer.
Sure, but again, you even look past, like, click data is still going to be associated to the engineers. It's still going to be associated as a search task. So again, you know, that bounce and reformatting of queries, et cetera, starts to play into it. You know what I mean? If someone puts Majestic, they bounce back from Merlot, from the wine site, and they put, you know, Majestic, links or something like that. Then they click through, they scroll your page, add to favorites or what the hell ever. Then they, in that search task, can go searching for vacations or something. It's that combined sort of behavioral data that they'll look and associate, not just like a click.
Yeah, I think so. But I think the, you know, going back to the topic of the actual day here, I think that the interesting thing for me about influencers online, so moving away from, and why I think this is relevant to the whole idea of influencers online, is that I think you put up VAR. Sorry, VAR. I can't pronounce you. Well, I can't remember your full name there. You put something up on the dojo.
That was Marj, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, a definition of influencer, and it described an influencer and how they're influencing, but it didn't say, and I think it's relevant, that an influencer is only influential in a topic. You know, and I think that that's key. You know, because we're all good at something. Well, hopefully, most of us are good at something. We can be influential and at something. It's very difficult to be influential at everything. You know, and I think that is really interesting because it means that Twitter profiles may have 200 million followers, but you know, if they're Justin Bieber, their influence is restricted to teenagers, frankly, teenage girls.
I couldn't agree more, Dixon. I mean, when I was researching names that were dropped, you know, when I asked, you know, who do you guys consider to be influencers, and they gave me a bunch of marketers' names. And, you know, Google had, you know, that thing on the right-hand side, you know, with pictures and, you know, content for many of those people, but a couple not. You know, and when I went to look at the profiles, I thought, well, you know, this just like the LinkedIn.
Which is the knowledge graph cards, just for anybody who's not sure what Marj was talking about. That's the knowledge graph cards you're talking about on the right.
Okay, all right. I don't know why they call it a graph because it's pictures and content, but whatever.
Because it's like a graph. It's about the knowledge, interlinking knowledge.
But to finish my train of thought, when I started to research these people, I noticed that, you know, maybe 3 or 4 of them did not have the knowledge graph. Now, then I started thinking, well, who really has influenced folks on the internet? And I thought, hell, Matt Mullenweg, my God, you know? I mean, he launched WordPress, and how many sites are using it now? You know, I mean, that person has created influence, and he never writes about his business. You know, he writes one or two line posts, and, you know, he's a musician. You know, then I thought about Darren Rouse, you know, who has also influenced me greatly, and I think he's an incredible blogger. You know, he's got a knowledge graph. you know, and
Well,
he's primarily a photographer. You know, I mean, so that's interesting to me.
I think it's important too to note the fact that we're talking about influencers in two different directions. The perceptions of the public, of other users, and how they may be influenced by someone, and the perceptions of the search engines, how they may perceive this person to be an influencer via social media interaction and all that. So, you know, they're two really very different perceptions.
Well,
Normally.
Gary Vanderchuck is an influencer too. I mean, what's the Jack Welch? You know, I mean, he's influenced, you know, mindset and been a thought leader for a long time. I mean, to me, these people are influencers. They do influence.
But again, from what's your thought process, Marge? I mean, yes, Vaynerchuk influences me tremendously, but that doesn't mean that Google will perceive him as an influencer.
But Google does.
Well, they do, but what I'm saying is they're two different perceptions. And I think that's important to keep that in mind, that you're talking about two different perceptions. I can go out like Chris Brogan and repost everything in the world and drop all kinds of comments and get up 3 million followers. Google may decide that I'm a crap excuse for an influencer. Okay.
Well, I get that, you know, and I mean, you know, as far as influencers go, though, I mean, today's definition of it seems to be related to social media reach. And as I was researching this morning, I also discovered that there's a new term coming up, influencer marketing. Now, what is that? What is that?
No, but I bet you I know what that is. I bet you I know that. I'm guessing. But okay, but Marge, if you look at, let me pull something up.
It's my favorite buzzword.
Influencer
Back in 2006. So,
we have another
yeah,
one.
But
Brand
again, you're marketing using them. So let's consider this. Back in 2006 or so, Google had a bunch of patents that are about social profiling. Now, the interesting part about these patents is that it's actually geared around, you know, obviously ads. And the concept being that an advertiser could show their ads to a more limited subset of people, meaning, you know, if we can get these top influencers to, you know, get our product in front of them, maybe they buy it and then they start talking about it, we don't have to advertise to all, you know, 2 million of their followers, because if we can hook them, they're going to go out and tell their people that, hey, this is a great product, go buy it, I loved it. But, you know, so all the things that Google was doing with this was really trying to target that. And what they were looking at basically is, again, you know, is who's at that top of that food chain. Meaning, you know, this guy's fairly influential, but he's also following this person, and these people are, you know, what are the common people that are being followed by various entities, and who do they follow, and who's at that top of that food chain that we can, our advertisers can approach, our advertisers can go after, and things of that nature, you know what I mean? So I would imagine whatever this new buzzword is, probably something along those lines, is weeding out who's at that top of that social structure of that food chain, you know what I mean? So, you know, Terry's somewhat influential, but Terry follows Rand Fishkin, so let's go after Rand Fishkin. Okay, good example, I'm sure there. But,
well, I think that's being used a fair amount by people because if you use, how many of you use, let's say, MailChimp, but MailChimp starts to record how people engage with messages that they send out and click-throughs, and they put their score up or down depending on click-throughs and stuff. And I think that, you know, whichever metric you can use that or Clout Score, but don't use Clout Score. But you know, you can start to build up ways of you know, scoring people influentially. And start to track him. And I think influencer marketing is exactly that. It's really just going out and talking to the people, as you say, at the top of the food chain. And that's how Majestic started. I started by going to SES or SMX. Oh God, kill me if I get the wrong one. Anyway, one of those in San Jose, and just, you know, I knew most of the speakers, you know, and I'd been to these conferences, so I knew them by face. So it was so much easier to get my message of the new product out, because, you know, I gave them all a free account for a couple of months, so there's opportunity for them to put some slide shots in their presentations, and, you know, bingo, you know, a huge amount of publicity compared to having to do it the hard way by doing PPC to everybody that's in the SEO industry.
Well, that's actually very smart. I mean, I like to simplify things, and ultimately, when people choose to be loyal to a product, they're buying the person behind that product, and people buy from people. I mean, they do. They always have. They always will. So you can say, you're the best, Skippy Doodle in the world, but if they don't know your face, your name, and what you stand for, you're less likely to get the business of those people who don't know you. So yes, influence. I mean, what is influence, for God's sakes? I mean, the internet does nothing other than boggle me sometimes with the things they pick up on and run with, and it just seems like social media. Now, clout. You mentioned clout first, so I'm
Yeah.
off the hook. I don't have to be blamed for that, but I've noticed that can be, I mean, that is based on your Facebook and Twitter activity, pretty much. You get active on Facebook and Twitter, your clout score will rise. Now Google Plus, they don't really care much about that. It doesn't seem.
I think clout score can go wrong. I mean, they've obviously made it better over the years, but I think it's got some limitations. I think it relies too much on follower counts, and I think it's hard because it's automated systems can start influencing clout score quite easily.
Well, yeah, and I guess the only thing that they really have to rank these influencers on is the number of followers. No, I mean, but is that a fair measure? Just because
No, it's
you
not.
have 1,650,000 people following you,
Yeah,
are
but
you
that's
are you
private.
huh? I mean, are you actually influencing them, or are they just regurgitating something you said because you're cool, and they think they're cool because they're propagating your content?
Well,
You
kind of
know,
like I think it was you guys were saying in the chat room earlier today, which was, an influencer get somebody to take an action, to do something, to move? If you're just following someone because you think they're a clown, or I'm following Eric Schmidt because he says some stupid shit, is he an influencer just because he has, because I'm following him? Probably not.
In SEO, how many people follow Danny Sullivan because he's Danny Sullivan? Don't even really know who he is or, what his credentials are, because everyone else follows him. They follow him.
yeah,
And
and,
influence, right?
so
Measures reach. That's all. It does not measure influence by any means. Because influence means you have influenced someone, not how many people you can spam. Right?
oh, good, there's
It's
Bill.
actually a measurement of how much you can spam, not actually influence.
But again, Terry, I think that it's clear that Danny Sullivan is influential. It's just again of the context in which he's influential. He's a great connector because he's a journalist, and so he's not influential in saying this, in necessarily saying this is what you should do next. He is a great influencer in getting the message, the message he gets out. People will listen to, but they're not his messages. They're somebody else's messages, and he's relaying because he's in the role, wearing the hat of journalist, if you like.
But still, Dixon,
Bill is influential. He posts about patents, and people go out and butcher them and write posts that have nothing to do with it.
and Dixon, Danny will say in an article, he'll say, this is happening here. You should go look at this, and he'll link out to some article. So he is influencing some interaction there too. So it's a real gray area, and everybody's metric is different. But I agree 100% with what Terry's saying. An influencer has to cause something. It may be a change in opinion, it may be a physical action, but there has to be results.
But in terms of Google or a marketer, how do you measure that, Doc? I don't know.
Well, you don't. You can't reliably, and you certainly can't reliably compare. You can look at your clout score today and compare it to your clout score a week from now, and you can see something that has some value there because you're looking at the same account with the same metric. But when you start comparing clout to somebody else's metric or comparing your clout to my clout, then it's total shit.
My cloud's bigger than your cloud. No, I mean
He's doing it.
that's why
They're on mute.
I brought up Matt Mullenweg, because I mean in 2006 he was unheard of, and now how many websites are using WordPress? I mean that's influence. Google as a brand has influenced. I mean they definitely have influenced the way people operate on the internet. I mean but that's not a person. The research I did this morning on the people, one of the names that came up was Neil Patel. Personally, he's probably a really nice guy, but his website annoys the heck out of me, because it's pop-up city. But apparently he influences. Apparently he's good at what he does. But then there's the quiet people like Darren Rouse, who just sticks with what he knows. He helps people with content and blogging, and he's good at what he does. Whoever invented Studio Press, I mean, he influenced a lot of sites use Genesis now. That's an influencer. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just too literal. I had a university professor accuse me of being too literal once upon a time, and that appears to be my bane in life. But yeah, Terry and I agree on this completely. It isn't necessarily the number of followers or the number of tweets or posts. It's how much does that actually influence behavior?
And I guess since we're tying this in with the authority, guys, is an authority an influencer, and is an influencer automatically an authority, or how do we define the difference?
Yeah, now that's a good question.
I would say that an authority is probably going to have to be an influencer, but I would not think the inverse is necessarily true.
Well, a lot of these come back. I mean, how many people have Malcolm? Have we got Malcolm Gladwell fans in the house? I think Tipping Point is pretty much looks at this in quite a lot of detail, and he goes through and uses the Boston Tea Party. When you started having an argument over RT, that Paul somebody or other that started running around all the houses and telling people that the British were coming.
Paul Revere, right?
Well, that's the guy. That's a guy. I'm sure he's famous to you guys, but he's just an annoying. We want our tea. We want our tea. He kind of like showed roles of these people of how I don't know if it was a Tipping Point or Blink of how De Vere was playing a role of connecting. He was a connector in that role. He himself wasn't an influencer, but he affected. He affected the resistance. It wouldn't have happened if Paul Revere hadn't gone running around the country. In which case, you'd still be colonials.
I know. Is it safe to say, maybe Marge, that an authority can be is generally an influencer, but an influencer isn't always an authority, aka Kardashian or somebody like that?
Yeah.
That would be my.
I think it might. Yeah, it seems like that. Because what is authority? That seems to be someone who's an expert on a topical area.
Well, authority doesn't have to be. Marj said it. It doesn't have to be a person. Authority can be in the form of a brand. Authority can come in the form of a legal system. It can come in a physical form, really. I think that. When internet terms, authority can come in all manner of digital assets. It could be a PDF paper, it could be a patent, it could be a website that is influential. But I think that more and more we shouldn't be looking at just a people. We should be looking at the digital asset that they represent, and that could be a brand, that could be them as an individual, that could be personal brand, but it could just as easily be the content that they put out there on the World Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
I like Bill's little philosophical question here on the sidebar. Is a Time Magazine article on black holes more influential than the Stephen Hawking one? Which one would get more links? And Bill, see, because Hawking's would obviously influence other influencers, and so that would probably have greater power, but the New York Times would probably get more play and more publicity. So that's an interesting question. Which one is true?
Yeah, so there was a patent that came out recently that talked about Google providing direct answers to questions or natural language answers, and that they would go to sites that they deemed to be authority websites. and create content from those based upon the topics that might show up in direct answers. And the way they defined authority websites for purposes of that were whether or not there were pages that people tended to click on when those pages showed up in search results, or whether or not there were pages that tended to rank highly for those particular query types in that topic. So, for instance, that question I asked in the comments ties in directly to that. Would Google do a Reader's Digest version of the web? Would they, when it came to a medical question, for instance, be more prone to provide WebMD answers than answers from the CDC? And chances are they would give out the WebMD questions, and it may be because they're better formatted for direct answers. They fit into a snippet-like response within a set of search results, where they're maybe the right length to answer a question, they're formatted correctly, they're properly sentences, and so on. So maybe authority has to do with the packaging. And the prettier the package, the more authoritative, possibly.
But it also comes back to context. If you're going to answer a direct question, if Google's going to be able to answer a question with scraped data, then it helps if they can first categorize the sites into the options of answers into reference versus New York Times, for example. So they would be less likely to bring back the New York Times as an authoritative source because they've already, in that context, compared to WebMD, for example, because they've already categorized WebMD as being about health issues and the New York Times being about current affairs. And so it's less likely that the New York Times would have information. They might have some good information about the weather. That's not.
Dixon?
Yeah.
Are you there? Okay, yeah, there you go. You sort of disappeared. So, yeah, my concern about that is, and you sort of, in your answer, gave a hint at my concern with it, which is you automatically went and called that type of data scraped data. As if you automatically called that type of data scraped data. As in, it's not a link to a page that is about something, it's the actual answer itself, which is sort of what Google's trying to provide with those direct answers. They want both. They have a hybrid approach. If you look at Peter Norvig's page in Google Research, the very top column is a video that he wrote explaining why Google provides a hybrid approach to research. They provide multiple types of answers. And they're doing that with these direct answers. They're not just showing the direct answers, though. When you query something like how do you make a martini, they don't have like the first 10 steps, even though there are 10 steps on how to make a martini. They also provide query type results or a list of web pages. So you get both. And they're sort of hedging their bets on the fact that some people prefer one version, some people prefer the other. And they're providing both. But when we call them scraped data, it's as if we're accusing Google of being a scraper, which I think a lot of people do. That's a popular thing in the SEO industry in some places, in some cases. But
well, certainly with that one box is that knowledge bit. It's an interesting issue because there's and in Europe we're the Germans are fighting this in the courts, and Spain have won some stuff in the courts as well. That the original trademark IP intellectual property laws and things that went around, deemed that Google was just acting as a navigation signpost for its content, and therefore was not deemed to be taking the content and using it as themselves. And they went through at least one court case, and I think a number of court cases, and we all really decided that this data is fine. They're not trying to take that content as their own.
Right. they're providing attribution in most cases to a lot of
They
those.
are now. They weren't a couple of months ago. They weren't a couple of months ago.
Some of them are to the point where the questions, the answers to questions like, why are circles round? Are you really going to give attribution?
Well, then you shouldn't put up an authoritative answer, then, should you? You can't trust the attribution.
The user wants. It depends, Dixon. If you look at it from the standpoint of the user, for once, let's get by this industry and talk about the users, right? They don't want to go to those fucking websites, or they would click the link or cut and paste or do something other than go on, they got their answer, and they move on to another search, right? It's not like Google is not giving them an opportunity to take that link. All Google is doing is providing the direct information that they want directly on the page. I mean, why are circles round? Well, because
Terry, let me put it to you this way. Let's say I put into Google tomorrow Ed Sheeran's #1 hit, and instead of coming back with information about Ed Sheeran's #1 hit, it comes back and plays me the song. At that point, have they gone over the line? I didn't need to go to Ed Sheeran's site. All I wanted to do was hear the song, Terry.
That's covered. You can't do that because that's covered by the publishing rights.
Okay, so we got
You got the licenses.
Where's the line? We're just arguing where's the line and when is it crossed.
Why they haven't crossed that line though? Really, have they?
Oh, in Spain, they have. So the courts in Spain have said they have. It really screwed up the newspapers that won the case because Google took all their data out of the.
The papers are crying because they got no traffic.
Yeah.
Right. Like, don't they learn over there that there's gonna you do something stupid, you're gonna have consequences.
What did
as far as I'm concerned, when you tell Google you can't put my stuff in your search engine, you should have known those were going to be the consequences. Like,
all right, give Bill the talking stick.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so the reason why people heavily involved in the semantic web are trying to put information online to share it, to provide data, is that they're in the business of distributing data. They don't care about whether or not you click on the link, go to their website, buy their product or whatever. They're out there, opengovernment.gov or whatever, opendata.gov wants to share information. That's their purpose, that's their mission, that's their goal. They want to provide those direct answers, and people want to see the direct answers. Now, in the cases where we have Google, you type in the lyrics to Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire lyrics, and they'll show you the lyrics to the song and say that they were the song was created by Justin Bieber and Usher. And if you click on Justin Bieber or Usher, you get their search results, but you get a knowledge panel where you can download Justin Bieber and Usher songs from Google Play and from non-Google sources. So they're commercializing that thing, but they're providing information. And those lyrics are licensed, so Google's paying for them. So not everything that you click on or that you search for that is the name of a song and lyrics are going to show lyrics because Google may not have gotten the licensing rights to them. But there is that commercial element and commercial aspect. And yes, it does poise Google directly against all the lyrics websites that they're supposedly showing people for. But is there a right for Google to, or is there a right for those companies to even be listed in Google?
Right. Where the value what? How do you decide which one is added more value? I mean, it's lyrics,
I mean, Abraham Lincoln was 6'4", That's the height he grew to. If your business model depends on Abraham Lincoln being 6'4", you got a not very good business model.
Yeah, that's been
Unless
my
your business
argument.
model is providing facts, like an encyclopedia.
Yeah, like a phone book provides phone numbers, and a phone number isn't copyrightable. A directory of phone numbers for a specific area is, but that individual phone number isn't.
But if you've got the whole of the Encyclopedia Britannica available without having to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, and yet the data comes exclusive from the Encyclopedia Britannica, then clearly that ownership of the information in Encyclopedia Britannica is exactly the same as the ownership of the music rights for the actual song itself. So I don't see a difference there. It's just a question of where the line is crossed.
You think that should be licensed?
No, I think that there should perhaps be much more control. Perhaps a good way to deal with it is to have a few more tags beyond robots.txt that allow us to say, right, this content is freely available. This content is not freely available, so that there's a machine way of saying what content on a page or in a file is available for use and which isn't.
So people should put web pages up on the websites that tell them whether or not they're allowed to link those pages on its site?
Well, in exactly the same way that if you put an MP3 up of your music, it's your music.
Uh-huh. Except in places like Brazil, where they get involved in remix, and they want people to download songs, change them, and then upload them again.
Then that's fine. So you would have a different reason or a different licensing of your content than if you were writing, as Pink Floyd and wanting to keep that intellectual property yourself.
But it's a World Wide Web, which means we have worldwide legal issues of varying types and shapes.
Yeah, that said, every country's got different copyright and laws, and so on. It gets muddy in a hurry. Yeah. Okay, let's circle the wagons back around here, boys.
Influence, yeah.
So Bill, at least from your perspective, patents and what papers you've read, things, Google, Bing, doesn't really matter, any search engine, everyone banters the term around authority. You know what I mean? Authority websites, or even a person, whatever. And there's even some tools out there that have metrics for these things. Well, as far as in your mind, when you start to think of this term that's bandied about kind of ethereally, how do you think, in your mind at least, that search engines look at authority or judge authority or treat authority? And how, where does that come from? It's such a, you hear it all the time. Have authority when we build authority and trust and all this stuff. But, from a search engine perspective, how do you think they might be doing stuff like that?
We've got so many different varieties and flavors and shapes. It's like an ice cream store with 51 of them. When you look
Ben & Jerry's authority ice cream. There we go.
When you look at some Bing patents or Microsoft patents, they talk about authority in a number of different ways. One of them deals with actual extrinsic authority. Like if you're a company, do you have a business license? Do you have a trademark? Add-on features like that are actually verifiable in the real world, and that shows some level of authority. When we talk about Google with the direct answers thing, they had 2 points where they determined whether or not a site was authoritative, and I think I mentioned those earlier. Are they pages that tend to show up? When they do show up, do people tend to click on them in search results? And also, do they tend to rank highly for a certain topic? Those two things make them look like authorities. So I mentioned PubMed and CDC, and not PubMed, WebMD tends to rank fairly highly for a lot of things, maybe more so than the CDC. So the CDC, in reality, it's probably more authoritative than WebMD as an institution, as a source of information. They give more detailed information in a way that a lot of consumers want to see it. That's their mission as a government agency, to provide and distribute detailed information about diseases. WebMD does it for a commercial reason. They do it pretty well. And sometimes it is more a matter of how something's formatted as to whether or not Google will use it as a direct answer when they display it. So it's not always the fact that it's more authoritative. It's authoritative above a certain threshold. We have seen.
But there's a degree of popularity involved in, you know.
Well, I think WebMD is more consumer centric, you know, because that site, I've been going to that site off and on since what, 2001, 2002, you know.
But as a government agency, the Center for Disease Control is supposed to be the most.
They would definitely be more clear on the information. WebMD is, you know, they'll give you symptoms and treatments, you know, but they're not going to be an authority, quote unquote, but they'll give the consumer a direction.
And part of their motivation is a profit motivation, which doesn't exist with the CDC.
True.
It shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't.
It gets more links, so of course it's more authoritative.
Well, that's where I was getting the popularity part from there, Terry. So, yeah, you know.
Also, more people on the web know what they do. How many people know what you go to the CDC for?
You know, what gets more links, the patent itself or Bill? Bill, because it's broken down into usable format. I don't want to read the patent. No, let's go. Bill did it. Go over here.
Well, and I think about IMDb. I mean, that's another site that has been around forever. And when I'm looking for information on, you know, a movie actor or a movie, or just trying to remember who somebody's name is, that's where I'll go. You know, I'll put in imdb.com space and the name.
I read a white paper that talked about IMDb and Netflix as sources of information for different movies. And it said they have an economic incentive to only have one page per movie. So in that case, that makes them really good sources about those.
Right.
Because everything on those about those movies is going to be on a single page. All the reviews, all the links to the actors, actresses, directors, and so on. It's not going to be split up, and the site's not going to be chaotic because of it.
Right.
So in that regards, it becomes very authoritative, and that's because of an economic incentive. And I mention economic incentive because a lot of times people talk about government sites and .edu websites as authoritative type sites. And if we go back a few years, like a year or two, we're going to see people talking about getting links from .gov and .edu sites and how those are preferable to .com websites. Maybe that was more common during the web forum days of the mid-2000s or the late 1990s or so on, but it was still, that's the way people talked about links, authoritative links, until Matt Cutts came out with a video one day where he talked about how he caught the Stanford newsletter selling links.
Well, you know, it was a very big thing back in the day to have, you know, get some university students that were able to post on various blogs and pay them money. So, you know, how much trust was really inherent in all that. So, I think Google's that stupid about it.
Most students get a website on the university site.
But yeah, you know, I remember one time, Bill, speaking of that I was searching around for information about Matt on the Stanford site. And yeah, I came across pharma and all kinds of shit, and I sent it to him. I was like, dude, you might want to go talk to your friends at Stanford. There's a mess over here.
Hey, Bill,
So,
just to change the topic a bit, Dave, back to the topicality. Bill, you wrote a piece, I think it was a couple of weeks back, about how Google is now analyzing the topics within your own website more carefully and maybe, you know, lessening the value or...
Well, I don't know whatever right is now. It was probably potentially could be. You know, just saying. This is how things get out of hand fast.
Right. I came across a computer science paper or standard a week or 2 or 3 ago where they talked about the differences between words like must and might and maybe, and how they were to be used to discuss how one thing might influence other things, and that degree of certainty or uncertainty or possibility. And I've been doing that for years. Danny Sullivan, when I wrote for Search Engine Land, used to insist that I put a disclaimer with every post. These are patented views. They are not actually really things that the search engines have admitted that they are doing, which is fine, good. But I wrote just to bring up a little bit of controversy. Rand wrote a article at Moz a couple days ago where he talked about causation
versus correlation. We've been beating up on it pretty good.
Yeah. The gist of it, supposedly, that if you pay attention to correlations and they seem reasonable correlations, they might raise questions that you otherwise might not have looked into, and that has value. And that part of it I agree with.
That's how we form hypotheses.
Well, and that's kind of, Bill, why over the years that I've been hanging out with you, that I got into the papers and patents and stuff, because it raises potential possibilities that I hadn't otherwise thought of. You read some patent or something, you go, wow, yeah, I haven't thought of that angle before. It's something to consider in the future when I'm looking at things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Can I come in there? Because Bill, I mean, you went back. You talked about the .edus, and that's really interesting. But it turns out, and Rand's study, is talking about correlation, and it's a really good example of where correlation was not causation, because the link that I put there was a study that we did that showed that actually, if you treated EDU sites stronger because they were EDU sites, your rankings would actually get worse. Your data would get worse. As a search engine, your data would get worse, because it's already natural that a good educational site will be stronger because of the content that's on it, not because it's an EDU site. And so the research that we did says, hey, there is no evidence that that getting links from EDU sites in itself is going to improve things for you. In fact, if the search engines change to make it EDU sites more popular, just because they're an EDU site, then their results will get worse.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Billy, if since we're bringing up our friends with the Moz, to your mind at least, again, not definitively because we don't know, is there a difference between page authority and domain authority, which are a couple of the metrics that they run over on the Moz? Is authority something that's a page level, a site level? Obviously, if there's an entity level, an element to authority, but is there do you think that they're going to look at things on a page level? Is it, this page is authoritative, but the rest of this website sucks, we don't trust it, but yeah, we love this page,
I liked Dr. Pete's presentation from a couple days ago on Moz, and a follow-up post to that one where he talked about, and it was a presentation from one of the Moz Moz webinars, or not webinars, conferences. But he talked about how sometimes you have to look twice at the metrics that you use, because sometimes you create a tool, and Dixon can probably talk about this a little bit. When you go to create a tool, you're trying to define metrics that it might be influenced by, and that you might be able to use to show how something's improved in some way. So he was talking about how they often created the tool first and then tried to decide upon the metrics, which maybe makes it harder to do.
Isn't that kind of like putting the cart before the horse?
Oh, sort of like that, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't always know where you're going to go with research, do you? To be fair to Moz, you don't. Start with research and then hope that they're going to come up with some practical use. you didn't go to the moon with the idea of making money.
No, and sometimes you need to do that discovery. You need to look at stuff, but is there a way of showing that maybe you get some type of benefit from using the tool?
That'd be a good reason to build it. Usually, that's a strong reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I mean,
Like, I can't see the reason to build a tool if you're not already looking for an answer, right? Why build a tool, right?
Right.
If it doesn't answer questions that you as a marketer need answered, then why build it? So,
Thus the phrase "necessity is the mother of invention."
correct.
I guess even Terry, at least to Moz's credit, sometimes they shit
That
can.
was,
And speaking of which would be the LDA tool. I remember last summer there, Bill, I was talking to Pete Myers, and I was like, "What happened to that LDA tool?" He's like,
right, no use for it.
"It's gone now." And I was like, "All right, okay, cool."
Because it was measuring something that did not matter. And it made them look stupid.
But they didn't know it wasn't going to matter until they tried it. So.
And I'm sure the zombies would have eaten that. So to their credit, they killed it.
How a search engine worked. Like, why would you build something that measured that, knowing what Google does, right? Like, that's like the LSI thing, right?
Why not? Any kind of semantic tools.
Gary, for every useful invention that has appeared in mankind's history, there was probably 100 or 1,000 failures before it. I don't fault anybody for trying something.
That's probably why, in my opinion, that's probably why they failed.
Well, maybe, but what the hell? I don't fault them for trying. They had the resources, they had the drive.
Well, the first thing they teach in programming is that programming is a solution to a problem. So I'll just rest my case.
Dixon, I think along with authority comes trust as well. So let's go back over your way as far as the trust flow and stuff like that. Like what was since we're talking about how tools come into existence, what was what was your motivation as far as that stuff, and what have you learned as far as expanding upon and working with the trust flow metrics that you guys have been trying to work with?
Well, when we started out, we didn't have a concept of getting to where we've got to now, and I'm sure that Moz, started out in the same sort of way, and they went down a way, and they got a long way with page authority and domain authority, and it's trusted by probably millions. So, I wouldn't say that's a failure. I'd say that's a success. But when we started out, the only metric we had really was how many web pages, how many IP numbers, and how many subdomains linked to each page. So what we had was a view of the web, which was larger than anybody else's, and counts of absolute numbers of links from web pages or websites or web domains or subnets, and we had to take our data from there. So our original metric was called AC rank, and it was appalling. It was terrible. In that, firstly, we decided to make it. Alex, in his wisdom, decided to make it 0 to 15 because he didn't want it to be confused with page rank for 0 to 10. So that's a great reason, isn't it? It was just a logarithmic score of absolute counts of, I think, Class C subnets. I think it was. But it was very very limiting in its nature. And but we still have that map, and we just found better ways to put the data together since then. And found
what is the basis of trust flow in your tool, Dixon? What defines trust?
So what defines trust is the proximity. Well, there's two things. There's trust and there's trust in context, a topical trust. And they're two different things. So trust flow came out first, which was ultimately it was not the number of links that go to a web page, but it was the quality of those links based on their proximity to pages that we trusted. And when we said we trusted, we knew that they were peer reviewed. They were human websites that were loved. The sites that were loved by humans. We didn't care whether they were popular or not popular. We knew they were loved by humans because what we were trying to do was to eliminate the spam. which was huge. Terry's got his arm up there, so I'll just stop in a second. But then when what we did is we started understanding topics, and we could start categorizing context, so we could then break that trust, which was based on proximity.
So does the trust flow stuff does actually work in the categorizations as well? Or is that just a separate metric?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we don't want to go too much into exactly what we're doing, but essentially, yeah, we're breaking down. We're finding seed sets of sites that are about a particular topic, and we're finding associations and proximity of websites to sites that we know are about and trusted about that particular topic. So it's kind of a vector graph of content emanating from an authoritative source of sites that we know that are about that content, and that's really sort of the trick. And that makes it very hard to copy, because you've got to have the whole data set to be able to do it. You've got to have a really large amount of, almost the universal amount of web to be able to get your data right. When you do, there's another analysis about PageRank, just using the PageRank algorithm on Wikipedia. And if you just use Wikipedia's data to work out PageRank, then you find that the most popular person on Wikipedia was a botanist instead of Jesus or Hitler. And so, you know, the stats break down. I'll bring that link up as well, because we did a thing on that as well. I'll let you talk now, Terry. I've talked enough.
No, I had a question for you. Was there any review of these when you first started, right? And you were making your seed set? Did you kind of review some of these websites too? Like
sure.
Human? Okay.
Sure.
Did you always collect anchor text?
We always collected anchor text for sure. And it was much later we started collecting the titles of pages. But yeah, getting those sites into baskets. Yeah, we found a way to do that. And yeah, I don't want to go too much into how.
I wouldn't either. That alone is a business. Smart guy.
Sure.
Good on you.
Yeah, I'm going to just you carry on amongst yourselves. I'm going to just bring up that link on PageRank on Wikipedia.
What I was trying to talk about earlier when I mentioned topicality on a website, and that there was a patent, I didn't even intimate in the least that they were doing it. It looks to me sometimes that they are looking at the topics on your website, and it is a bigger deal than I think people realize. I mean,
well, Bill, I think Google's long been categorizing things, if it's topicality of a page, of a website, of a user, of a person. You know what I mean? Like even the personalization, personalized search type patterns. You know, a lot of that was about categorizing users in different means and forms. So yeah, I guess to what Terry's asking, I think that's something that you know within reason can assume they're doing to some degree, or not.
The last patent I wrote about that talked about categorizing things involved being able to try to guess or predict when somebody entered a query term which category they were referring to based upon historic use data. So, for instance, if somebody typed in Lincoln, Google might look at that and say, okay, I have lots of different types of Lincoln. I have Abraham Lincoln, you may have heard of him. I have Lincoln, Nebraska. I have Lincoln, the car. So which Lincoln do these people want to see? I could just give them the highest ranked page, but those are very different things. And if I understand a category, maybe I could give them pages that are about the same Lincoln and let them decide which one they prefer to see. So
there's a band too, Lincoln Park.
What's that?
There's a band, Lincoln Park, too.
Right, but that's a different Lincoln, and that's a different type of Lincoln.
Yeah, but if it was voice search, they wouldn't know the difference, probably.
Maybe.
So, Bill, that becomes much more valuable if you know something about the person that's typing it in as well. If you know that that person happens to be in Nebraska, all of a sudden the user is much more likely to be wanting to know about Lincoln, Nebraska than Lincoln the car. If they're in Detroit, chances are the car's more interesting.
If that person,
or vice versa, if that person does a lot of searches for historical characters, etc. Yeah, you can categorize the user and start to match it up, I assume.
Yeah. If that person's logged into an account where their search history is associated with their search, then it becomes much easier for Google to make that assumption, try and make that guess, because then Google can say, okay, our past history indicates this person is more likely to be searching for the president. But that's a completely different patent, and that wasn't the one I was talking about with the Lincoln thing. With the Lincoln thing, I was talking about more of a Google collecting information about different aspects of search as entities. So the query term as an entity, the selection of a page within a search result as an entity, and that they would take and create knowledge graphs, information to try to measure those things. They might not just look at what the query term was, what the page selected was, how long somebody stayed on a page, but they'd also look at geographic locations of a query, for instance, because when somebody wants soda and they're from the Midwest, Central America, they'll search for pop. When they're from the South and they want something about soda, they'll search for a Coke. When they're from the Northeast, they might type in soda. All three are the same thing. People want the same answers, but the query terms are going to differ.
Yes, regional colloquialisms do play in, I know.
Right, that was one of the most popular New York Times articles last year. A post, an infographic type thing they did. No, it was a quiz they did about dialects and which part of the United States you're most likely from if you answer questions and give you like 10 questions and they guess where you're from. But yeah, queries work like that, and Google understanding, tracking, collecting information about queries, about selections, about so on, can help create categories and an understanding of a category when you search for a query, or a best guess as to which type of thing you'd most likely prefer to see. So we do have query deserves freshness type things happening where we'll see a range of things. The search for Jaguar, as David might be prone to suggest. We know we could talk about a football player from Jacksonville, a type of animal, a car, an operating system from Apple, and so on. So probably the most...
For the record, I actually did get that one from a patent. I've just been using it for years, and it just, it seemed like the easiest one. Well, I've also still seen stuff like the White House. Is that, that White House down the street or the White House?
Mm-hmm. Being able to provide some guesses based upon the query, though. The patents often these days, and some search engineer, I think he was from Yahoo, said recently in the UK at some British computer symposium that these days SEO or the way search engine works, search engineers are looking more at queries than they had been. They used to look at documents a lot more. Now they're spending time looking at queries. I think he was right. I think there's some interesting things potentially going on there. And when we have things like rich snippets and so on, people do tend to spend more time and maybe enjoy a little bit more having more colorful search results than 10 blue links. They like the starred reviews, the special layout. Search for New England Patriots and you get a scrollable roster of the players as one of your top results. which is a lot better than a link to New York, the New England Patriots website.
I think you mentioned you talked about the query being a lot more research going into the query, and I think there absolutely is. And you also mentioned earlier on Peter Norvig, and he did a video.
I didn't, but I could, and probably should as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Peter Norvig did a really good webinar or video or speech, and I think it was British Columbia University, where he showed how they were counting the number of times users had typed in each individual word and each individual chain of words, so up to something like 6 or 7 words in order, and so he was doing that, really showing how how Google Suggest can start working, I think, but it was also really demonstrating, what somebody might be meaning when they start typing something. They can very, very quickly pull out that they're much more likely to want to have this four-word thing than this 2-word thing. So they haven't finished their query yet, because there's much more people type in this 3-word chain or this 4-word chain than the 2-word chain. So they're already able to bring back better data as a result of that. So they
just cut in really briefly, quickly, Dixon.
No, don't cut it. Just finish.
I think there's a Google patent that talked about speech, search on speech also, and the ability to predict the next word when returning results.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's happening like in Siri and stuff like that now, and on the mobile phones it's coming out as well, isn't it? That technology.
Hey, Laura.
Oh. We lost him. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
No. Right. He knows how to make an exit. Elvis has left the building. That's it. Aren't you supposed to drop the mic? Drop the mic when you leave like that? Just bam! That's it. Walk off stage.
I'm back.
Boom! That's it. Beautiful.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
If you turn off the browser, it loses the whole Google video thing.
Yeah, it's weird about that.
The presentation, the unreasonable effectiveness of data, maybe.
So was that a question to me? I missed it.
Yeah, that was a question. Was that the presentation on the unreasonable effectiveness of data?
It might have been. I was actually the reason I went off the browser is because I was trying to find it. So I'll go back off and try and get the link to it again.
If that's what you're talking about, that's really, really good. It's about an hour long, but it's definitely worth watching.
It's well worth looking at every single moment of it. Yeah, I think it is probably that one. I'll go and find the link anyway for anybody that wants it.
Yeah, I think the best, easiest way to find it is that little X button at the top. Top right. Yeah, click that. My God. All right, where to next, gentlemen?
Just to bring it back, Peter Norvig, I've heard that he's supposedly working with another guy from Google, the guy in charge of structured data, Alon Halevi, on a paper or two, and they're guys who worked on the unreasonable effectiveness of data, so it would probably be really good, because that one was really good. The thrust of that one was that even with weak algorithms, if you have enough data, you can learn lots of things that are really useful. So for instance, when you're doing all the language translation type things, you can start doing translations of languages that nobody at your search engine speaks, because you've got so much data flowing in that it helps correct all the problems. That was one of the big ones that he stressed in the unreasonable effectiveness of data paper. But Alon Halevi has written a lot of things about structured data, and between the two, I'm looking forward to whatever they come up with, whatever they're supposedly working on. So, just a warning, keep an eye out, because it's probably going to be pretty good.
Well, Doc, Terry, Steve, anybody got a direction they want to take this at this point, after all that's been done?
Good.
No? They're all still just digesting over there, man.
Yeah, just listening.
Been interesting.
Wow. A ringing endorsement there, ladies and gentlemen.
So have we concluded anything other than the fact...
Steve's still playing poker. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Have we concluded anything other than the fact that the only real way that a search engine, other than categorizing, can identify an influencer is based on their social media, sharing, etc.?
Well, all down, not just social. It could be links. It could be, you know what I mean. Again, like Bill was saying earlier, various click-through and user data from the results. But yeah, beyond that, they really make a judgment beyond that. I don't know. You could, just or something. I'm not sure if they. Anyway, sorry, Doc. Go ahead.
At the end of the day, you got to remember, an algorithm is nothing but a mathematical formula. So all it can do with anything is determine probabilities. Period. So you can't look at authority rank, page domain, page or domain authority, or a trust flow or anything else as an absolute. It's an indicator. It's also an algorithm. It's also looking at probabilities, and it may be looking at different criteria. But the bottom line is that whether it be Google or Majestic or Moz or you and me, there are no conclusions. It's just probabilities.
No conclusions. So we'll just let people yammer about, they're an influencer because they have 10,596 followers on Twitter. Never mind.
Well, also they're an influencer today. Lady Gaga is an influential in music today, but she may not be tomorrow. Barack Obama, we can pretty much say, is not going to be half as influential 5 years from now because he's not going to be president of the United States.
One can only hope.
Somebody on Facebook tell me off one day because they got upset after they mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk, and I responded that I had recently seen him and that I had enjoyed the stories that he told, even though I'd heard them earlier from him in a different presentation. The guy responded, "They're not stories, they really happened." And it's like, okay, I'm not going to participate in this conversation anymore, thanks.
and if you're going to invoke his name, you got to do it right. It's Vaynerchuk.
Right.
Okay, guys, I have got to an hour and a half, so it's 7:30 at night here, and I've got Friday night, and my family are telling me I have to go and play badminton. So.
Well, not a problem. I think we'll actually be an hour and a half anyway. So.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy your time.
We'll round up the public portion of this as always. Anyone who wants to join us after the fact, they can. But yeah, I think we've really covered a lot in an hour and a half anyway. So thanks a lot, Dixon, Bill, of course, and Doc, and Steve, and Terry, and Marge, and all you folks for coming in. So
thanks again.
Good weekend, Dix.
Don't do anything I wouldn't. We'll leave it pretty open.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you don't really do much, do you? So.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed up, Bill. I miss your company in the dojo. I do. Come back.
Yes. The dingling on Skype got a bit much for him.
Well, I could teach him how to shut off the notifications,